Gang violence is an issue in Haiti. We wanted to bring your attention to this hostage crisis. 12 Americans were kidnapped by a violent group. They are called 400 Mawazo. I'm sorry, I haven't heard it said out loud. It could be Mawozo. I do not know. They have a reputation for rape and murder, so authorities are taking this very seriously. But they have very little to work with as Haiti continues to implode from a presidential assassination and a major earthquake this weekend. This was a group of Christian missionaries that was kidnapped. The U.S. State Department is trying to work with basically what is left of the Haitian government. Now, the U.S. has said that they will send aid to help Haiti rebuild. They have pledged money also for gang violence. That number is about $15 million, but gang violence continues to get worse. This gang is asking for a ransom. Probably not great that this budget of $15 million has been politicized, because now the group knows what they can ask for.
Right, and specifically, if you listen to Richard Frankel, who's an FBI negotiator, he's actually had to negotiate with this group, the Mawazo group, the 400 Mawazo out of Haiti, and to get somebody back. And so he's had to do negotiations. He says all they care about at all in this entire situation is money. Listen to what Frankel has to say about this.
First few hours are very critical in any hostage taking. Haitian gangs have been kidnapping since the early 2000s, if not before that. Their intent is to make money. They are doing these kidnappings for ransom, for money. No politics are involved. It's not terrorism. Their goal is to make as much money as they can from the hostage taking.
Really troubling. I mean, to think that, and some of these Christian missionaries, I mean, they brought their kids, right? So they've got
Yes.
a 2-year-old child, there's 2 children in this as well.
The youngest is 2.
Yeah, and this is an example of, I mean, I think one of the reasons that this is so important beyond just the humanitarian side is that this was, some of the chaos that we're seeing now is U.S. made, right? The U.S. support of the assassination of this president, which led this, just a few weeks before this country goes into an earthquake collapse. But the U.S. sticking its nose into other countries' business, and then
I feel like you should explain that. I feel like you shouldn't just say the U.S. helped assassinate this president. So why don't you say why you're saying that?
We've documented here on the show. I mean, the U.S. backed militias that were sent in and were responsible for this, that were actually fighting with these guys out of Latin America to go in there and do this. And
why? Why would they do that?
I don't know, maybe the corruption. They felt like this president was corrupt. There's plenty of corruption inside that government.
And you believe intel on that is...
And sometimes we do things just to sow chaos. We literally will sometimes do things just to create chaos.
Okay. I also have read these reports. I also believe that the United States has benefited from other countries' implosions quite often, right?
Right. I mean, we have a long history of trying to do this. Cuba, on and on. The list is endless.
I also have read this intelligence. I think it feels credible. And so I'm with you.
On the U.S.
On the piece of the puzzle that says that the U.S. supported militia that then imploded this country.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. I'm with you there.
Okay.
But now, what do we get out of now having to funnel money in to fix it?
Well, we get to establish our own regime, right? We get to establish a U.S.-backed regime. We get to go in there
and... But it's borrowed money. Like, we have to borrow it in order to send it over into a country we already helped implode.
We don't care about borrowing money.
We clearly
don't. We're $28 trillion in debt. What do we care about borrowing money? I mean, come on. Really?
Right. When it comes to empire expansion, we've got all we need.
We have an endless supply of money. The United States has an endless bank account for printing to go into countries. I just finished reading an amazing book called Chaos, speaking of chaos, and a journalist who spent 30 years researching this topic. And the amount of work that the CIA and the FBI have done to undermine governments around the world is astonishing. From Vietnam to Cuba to all sorts of campaigns that are unconstitutional, and then when Congress found out about them, said this is an absolute stain on democracy and held hearings on it to eradicate these things. So there is no shortage of time that the United States has spent trying to upend these regimes all over the world.
But as a human interest story, right now, people are afraid to go out. There's reporting that this kidnapping group, this terrorist organization, will kidnap from all classes, wealthy to poor, and that they are indiscriminate, right? And obviously, anytime you see an increase in a population that is powerless, you see an increase in violence. Those things are linearly related. It is not a correlation, it's causation. And so, yes, now this is a human interest story because 12 of them are Americans, but we should care that the total number of kidnapped people is 17 and hope that all 17 are released, not just the Americans.
It's just so sad. And now these guys know that they can, that the U.S. will probably pay it. And look, that's a responsibility, right? We destabilized this country. Americans are there trying to help. They were at an orphanage, by the way. They were at an orphanage trying to help people, right? And these missionaries were trying to do work to help this community that's just absolutely descended into chaos. And now the United States needs to step up. We destabilized this country. We need to do what we can.
It should also be noted that on the U.S. State Department, it is saying do not travel to Haiti. They have a do not travel up there, and so many Americans do not follow the State Department advice. I'm not saying that missionaries shouldn't have gone there, but, I am saying that before you travel somewhere, check the State Department website and please try to follow that advice.
Yeah. So sad.
Well, it always gets me that we're like the news media is all going off on this as it's like this huge breaking story, but you still don't see anything about the people in the United States that are still suffering the pandemic. Like there's nothing about that. It's like all these other stories take precedence over everything that's happening right here. There's people starving right here. There's all of this stuff happening right here, but yet we try to find these things to focus on that are outside of it.
Well, I think that anything, it's about being a human at this point, and everything is interrelated, right? And so the fact that this country is imploded, they still have people buried under buildings, and at the same time, violence will get worse there. And we know that an unstable country and the violence that comes from that affects all of us. So I don't think it's about we need to look inside first, because clearly we don't keep our eyes on our own paper. We don't keep our hands in our own cookie jar, right? Yeah. That hasn't worked.
Yeah. Thanks for subscribing to the channel. You can also become a channel member by going to morninginvest.com/join, where you can stick it to the mainstream media and support independent journalism. We're able to bring you the stories that you won't see on any of the major billionaire-backed networks. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time, everyone.